I just had a chance backstage to say hello to Congressman Bruce Westerman, who's going to be our next speaker. He's from Arkansas, so round of applause for him. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. Congressman Westerman serves as chairman of the House Committee on Natural Resources, where he leads on issues critical to counties, including land and water management, energy, conservation, and federal permitting reform. Big priorities for us. Chairman Westerman has been a steadfast champion for our counties, particularly through his leadership on the SPEED Act, one of our 5 biggest priorities for this Ledge Conference. We especially appreciate his commitment to including counties as cooperating agencies in federal permitting. This is something that he took forward and led with us on a request. This ensures that our local expertise is built into decisions from the beginning. Before coming to Congress, he served in the Arkansas General Assembly and brings practical experience as an engineer and a forester, which gives him a grounded perspective on how federal policy impacts our communities on the ground. Please join me in welcoming Chairman Bruce Westerman. Congressman.
Well, good morning, counties from across this great land. It's great to be here. We often, I think of counties as representing rural areas, but counties represent all areas. And I know that we all are counties. I know that's your theme this year. And wherever you're from in America, you are represented by a county, a borough, or a parish, and over 3,000 of them across the country. And you might wonder, am I from a rural area? Am I from a urban area or a suburban area? And I heard the best way to tell that is that if you can go out on your porch without any clothes on and nobody notices, you're probably from a rural area. I'm from a rural area. Not to say that I do that, especially since we got a Ring doorbell. But if you go out on your porch without any clothes on and somebody calls the police, you're from a suburban area. If you go out on the porch without any clothes on and nobody cares, you're from an urban area. But I want to talk to you about some legislation that affects all counties across all this great land, that affects all areas, rural, suburban, and urban. It affects every American, and I say it affects every American more than probably anything but taxes. I think taxes gets all of us, but when we talk about permitting, it's a hidden issue that everybody gets affected by it. It's kind of removed from our everyday life, yet it affects our everyday life in everything we do. It causes the prices of things to increase. And as we're in a moment in our country where we're looking at how to reduce cost so that Americans can afford to live, as we're looking at how to grow and expand infrastructure and energy production, permitting lies at the heart of all of that. And at the heart of permitting is a law called the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. You're probably well familiar with it. And currently it takes an average of 4 to 5 years to get a NEPA permit. If you're in some industries like mining, it takes 29 years. If you're looking at public infrastructure like roads, bridges, highways, ports, navigable waterways, airports, all those things, it takes an average of 6 years to do that. We put several $1 billion in the Big Beautiful Bill last summer to update air traffic control systems at our airports across the country. A few months ago, I was meeting with Secretary Duffy, and he was telling me the holdup is permitting. Permitting to get fiber optics cables into the control towers at airports across our country. That's a lack of common sense. That's not benefiting anyone, and it's creating not only a cost economically and to the federal budget, it creates a cost to safety. Delays on interstate highway projects, delays on ports and airports, those are safety issues as well as economic issues. McKinsey did a study last summer that showed that just on public infrastructure over a 4-year time frame, that there was about $2.7 trillion of cost incurred by American citizens by delays just on public infrastructure. I doubt that anybody that gets in their vehicle or gets on an airplane like I did this morning realizes that there's added cost on the American taxpayer because of delays in permitting. Permitting also delays things like adding new energy. And with the demand for AI and data centers, it's imperative not only for our ability to keep sufficient amount of electricity on the grid, to keep prices low, but to meet the demands that are not only an economic security issue, but they're also a national security issue as we try to stay ahead in the AI race. For all of those reasons and many more, I'm a forester, and we can't manage our federal forest anymore because of NEPA permitting. And it affects everything we do. But because it affects so many things, and I think people are realizing how burdensome and how much lack of common sense is in our permitting process, we were able to put together a bipartisan permitting reform bill called the SPEED Act. And I want to thank NACo especially for your work with us on the SPEED Act. When we passed it out of the House in December, we had over 400 supporters from across the country, with NACo being one of those, and I believe 10 to 12 individual counties wrote letters of support for the SPEED Act as well. Thank you very much for that, and I encourage you, if you haven't written a letter of support, to go ahead and do that and get on the record saying that we need permitting reform. We need to be able to build things here in America again. We need to be able to build them at a pace where we can keep up with a changing world and meet the demands that we have all across urban, suburban, and rural America. Now, I know you've been here for a few days, and you've already made some Hill visits from some discussions that I've had, and I hope you'll make some more Hill visits. Now, we passed the SPEED Act out of the House. Jared Golden, a Democrat from Maine, is the co-sponsor of the SPEED Act, and we were able to get a good bipartisan vote out of the House. We sent a strong message to the Senate that this is an issue that affects House members, Senate members, Republicans, Democrats, Independents. Again, it affects everybody. It affects Americans and our ability to build and compete. So we need to make the Senate understand how important it is that they act on permitting reform. And we're up against a bit of a shot clock. I know March Madness is coming up, and March tells me that it's a fun time for basketball, but it's also getting late into the year during a midterm election year when we can get meaningful legislation passed. But this is a bill that I think has a great chance to get over the finish line, but it's going to require efforts from folks like you from all over the country, meeting with your senators and telling them how critical this is to the success of your ability to govern in your individual counties. I hope you will do that. I know you've been doing it, but I promise you, you can't do it enough, and don't underestimate how important that is to go speak to your senators and to your House members. Whatever the Senate passes is going to come back to the House, but I feel pretty good about that if we can get it through the Senate. So, with that being said, there's also some other issues that we're working on. The Endangered Species Act. This is a law that's been in... I hope you're clapping because we're working on fixing the Endangered Species Act. Now, the Endangered Species Act is a well-intentioned, well-purposed law that has done some great things. I always say that if you were doing a football analogy, the Endangered Species Act has an incredible defense. Like, if a species gets put on the Endangered Species Act, it usually doesn't go extinct. It's got a really high rate of protection in stopping extinction. But the purpose of the Endangered Species Act was to recover species that were put on the Act, and it's a dismal failure at being proactive in recovering species. At a rate of only about 3% of the species ever put on the Endangered Species Act have been recovered. What we want to do is make the ESA work for those species that we all care about. And to do that, we're going to have partnership from the federal government, from state governments, from county governments, and from tribal governments to make that work. The federal government controls somewhere around 30% of the land, a little less than 30% of the land, but over 70% of the land in this country is on private land. You can't fix habitat if you're only focusing on less than 1/3 of the land. So it's important that we work with private individuals, with county governments, with the federal government and the state and tribes, and get everybody on the same page of how we actually make the Endangered Species Act work. We do that by changing some of the definitions that are out there that have been used by litigants just to stop projects. We do that by incentivizing private industries and organizations to work to recover species. Right now, if a species is identified or critical habitats identified on private land, it pretty much shuts everything down, even if a company has been working to create the best habitat for that species. And again, I come from an undergraduate degree in engineering and a forestry degree from graduate school, and if you're thinking about forestry and wildlife, it all comes down to habitat. And really, all wildlife, if you want to take care of wildlife, you have to be focused on the habitat. We do things in this country in the name of environmental stewardship that in the end creates a worse environment for the creatures we're trying to protect than what they had going forward. I'll go back to forest fires. We stop a lot of forest management projects under the Endangered Species Act or under the Clean Water Act or some other statute that, again, is a well-meaning statute, but it creates a barrier to doing the work. So say if we stopped a forest management project because of a clean water issue or an endangered species issue, and the forest doesn't get managed, and the forest doesn't care what any agency says or what we say in Congress. The forest is a dynamic living organism that's just going to grow and fill the growing space until there's no more growing space, and trees compete for light, nutrients, and water. And when there's not enough of that, they're competing with each other. They get frail. They become subject to insects and disease attack, which kills the trees. And then they're subject to catastrophic wildfire, which does, guess what? It kills those endangered species, it destroys their habitat, it creates soil erosion that runs off into the streams and creates more water pollution. Now, this all goes back and ties into the bigger picture of the SPEED Act. And some people might argue that we're undermining bedrock environmental laws. And I will argue till I'm blue in the face that what we're doing is actually making the environment better when we accelerate the rate of permitting and the ability to build things and increase innovation and technology. And thank you. Permitting reform stops, or the inability to permit stops innovation at many different levels. It stops us from introducing new technologies. It stops us from introducing new ways to manage critical habitat. And in the end, American consumers and the environment both pay for it. There's this idea that you can't have a healthy environment and a healthy economy at the same time, that they're mutually exclusive. But I believe that they're dependent upon one another. If you travel around the world and you look at the most economically prosperous countries, you're probably going to see the most environmentally conscious countries. You're going to see a country where people have an economy where they can afford to take care of the environment in a better way. So it's extremely important what you do. We can't do our work here in Congress without your help and your support from around the country. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming up here and advocating on behalf of common sense legislation like the SPEED Act, like the Fix Our Forest Act, like the Endangered Species Amendments Act, and all those things that we're working every day to try to make it where you can do your jobs better and where our country can benefit and grow going forward. So once again, we are all counties I feel like I should do the dun 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 dun. And I hope you have a successful week here in Washington. Thank you for the work you do, and God bless.